Sometimes the bravest hearts are the ones that choose kindness when every legend tells them to run. Cold rain swept across the towering cliffs surrounding Blackwood Citadel, turning narrow mountain trails into ribbons of glistening stone beneath a sky filled with rolling thunderclouds. Most of the kingdom had already retreated indoors, where warm fireplaces and sturdy walls offered protection from the growing storm. Only the wind wandered freely through the ancient pine forests, carrying with it distant echoes that few people ever dared to follow. Emma Carter paused beneath the shelter of an old cedar tree, adjusting the leather satchel hanging across her shoulder. Inside rested carefully prepared healing herbs, fresh bandages, and small glass bottles filled with herbal remedies she had gathered earlier that afternoon. As one of the royal healers, she had spent the entire day caring for villagers before beginning the familiar walk back toward Blackwood Citadel. She expected nothing more exciting than a warm meal and a quiet evening beside the castle hearth. Then she heard it. A single low cry drifted through the storm. It was not loud. It was not frightening. It carried something far more difficult to ignore. Pain. Emma slowly lifted her head, listening carefully while the rain softened every other sound around her. The cry came again, slightly weaker this time, somewhere beyond the narrow trail leading toward the Forbidden Mountain. Her heartbeat slowed as recognition settled over her. Every child growing up within the Northern Territories knew the stories surrounding that mountain. Long before Blackwood Citadel existed, the legends claimed an ancient dragon had chosen the mountain as its resting place. No hunter entered its valley. No traveler crossed its caves. Even experienced alpha warriors respected the warnings passed from one generation to the next. Most believed the dragon still slept beneath the stone, waiting for a disturbance powerful enough to awaken it. Emma had always considered the stories worthy of respect, whether every detail proved true or not. Yet the cry came once again, quieter now, filled with unmistakable exhaustion. She could not simply walk away. Pulling her hood tighter against the rain, Emma stepped away from the safety of the main road and followed the sound through the darkening forest. Thick pine branches shielded much of the falling rain, while ancient moss-covered towering stones scattered across the mountain path. Every few yards, she paused to listen before continuing deeper into the valley. Eventually, the forest opened into a wide clearing surrounded by enormous cliffs. Mist drifted gently above the ground, while a vast cave entrance stood silently before her like the doorway to another age. The air itself felt older there, carrying a quiet stillness unlike anywhere else in the kingdom. Then she saw him. Resting near the entrance to the cave lay an enormous silver wolf. His magnificent coat shimmered faintly despite the rain, and even from several yards away Emma immediately recognized him. There was only one wolf of that size and beauty in all the Northern Territories. The Great Wolf, the loyal companion of Alpha King Ethan Blackwood. Relief washed across her for a single heartbeat until she noticed he was struggling to remain awake. His breathing had become slow and uneven, and one powerful front leg rested awkwardly beneath him. The proud guardian who normally inspired admiration throughout the kingdom now looked exhausted after what had clearly been a long journey. Emma hurried forward without hesitation, kneeling carefully beside the great animal while speaking in the same calm voice she always used with frightened patience. "You are safe now. I am here." The silver wolf slowly opened his eyes. Their brilliant silver color reflected both intelligence and quiet strength, yet beneath them Emma saw unmistakable fatigue. Rather than pulling away, the wolf remained perfectly still as though recognizing the kindness in her voice. Emma gently examined his injured leg with patient hands. "You have been walking on this much longer than you should have," she whispered. She carefully cleaned the wound using fresh water from a small flask, before applying crushed mountain herbs and wrapping the injury with clean bandages from her satchel. Throughout the entire treatment, the great wolf never once growled or resisted. He simply watched her with calm understanding while rain continued falling softly around them. As Emma finished tying the final bandage, she smiled warmly. "There, that should help." The wolf slowly lowered his head in quiet gratitude. For the first time since arriving, Emma noticed something else. The cave behind them did not feel empty. A slow current of warm air drifted outward from the darkness, carrying with it the faint scent of ancient stone and something almost impossible to describe. The ground beneath her boots trembled so gently she almost believed she imagined it. Tiny fragments of dust slipped from the rocky ceiling near the cave entrance. Somewhere deep inside the mountain, something enormous released one long, peaceful breath. Emma instinctively turned toward the darkness while the great wolf immediately lifted his head, his silver eyes fixed upon the hidden depths beyond the cave. Neither of them moved. Then, from somewhere far beneath the ancient mountain, another slow breath echoed through the stone like the heartbeat of a legend that had just begun to awaken. Emma remained perfectly still as the deep breath faded into silence beneath the mountain. Rain continued falling softly beyond the cave entrance. Yet inside the ancient valley the air had become strangely calm, almost as though the storm itself refused to disturb whatever rested below the stone. The great wolf slowly pushed himself into a sitting position. Although the fresh bandages already eased some of his discomfort, he immediately stepped in front of Emma, placing his broad body between her and the dark entrance. His silver eyes never left the endless shadows beyond the cave. Emma gently rested one hand against his thick shoulder. "You are trying to protect me," she whispered with a warm smile. "But you are the one who needs to rest." The wolf glanced back at her for only a moment before looking toward the darkness again. His quiet determination made her understand that his concern was not for himself. He feared what might awaken if they remained too long. Another faint tremor traveled beneath the ground. Small pebbles rolled gently across the cave floor before coming to rest once more. Emma looked toward the towering entrance where enormous stone pillars, carved by nature over countless centuries, disappeared into darkness far beyond the reach of daylight. A gentle current of warm air drifted outward again. Unlike the cold mountain rain outside, this breath carried comforting warmth rather than danger, as though a giant hearth burned somewhere beneath the earth. Emma had treated frightened children, exhausted travelers, and wounded wolves before, yet nothing in her experience resembled the strange peace surrounding this hidden place. Even so, she quietly gathered another handful of medicinal herbs from her satchel and carefully checked the great wolf's bandage once more. "You should not travel yet," she said softly. "The medicine needs time." The great wolf remained standing beside her, but lowered his head slightly, accepting her care without resistance. While Emma secured the final knot, she noticed several deep scratches across his thick silver fur that rain had almost hidden. She gently brushed away wet leaves caught within the coat before carefully cleaning the remaining spots with fresh water. Every movement remained slow and reassuring. The wolf never flinched. Instead, he watched her with calm trust that seemed remarkable for such a magnificent creature. Minutes passed peacefully until another sound echoed through the mountain. This time it was not a breath. It resembled the slow shifting of ancient stone somewhere deep below their feet. The great wolf immediately lifted his head. His ears turned toward the darkness, and his posture became quietly alert. Emma followed his gaze. The cave remained almost completely black except for faint reflections of rainwater shimmering across the rocky walls. Then something unusual caught her attention. Tiny crystals embedded within the stone began glowing with a soft golden light, one after another, stretching farther into the mountain like distant stars awakening at night. She had never seen anything like it. Instead of creating fear, the gentle light filled the cave with quiet beauty. Emma took one cautious step forward, curious rather than reckless. The great wolf immediately moved beside her, gently touching her arm with his shoulder as though asking her not to continue. She stopped at once. "All right," she whispered kindly. "We will stay here." The wolf relaxed slightly, grateful that she had understood. Far away inside Blackwood Citadel, concern had already spread throughout the royal household. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood stood inside the great council chamber, studying a detailed map spread across a long wooden table. Captain Rowan pointed toward the northern forests with quiet urgency. "We tracked the great wolf this far before the storm erased every trail." Ethan remained calm, but everyone present recognized the quiet determination in his silver eyes. "Search every safe path," he instructed. "Avoid unnecessary risks. The Forbidden Mountain remains protected ground." High Elder Benedict, standing near one of the tall windows, listened thoughtfully before speaking. "Your Majesty, legends often become dangerous only when people approach them with fear instead of respect." Ethan looked toward the elder. Do you believe the stories are true? Benedict smiled gently. I believe ancient places remember the hearts of those who enter them. Ethan considered those words without replying. Back at the mountain, evening slowly approached as the rain finally began to ease. Emma carefully spread her traveling cloak across a flat stone so the great wolf could rest more comfortably without lying directly upon the cold ground. The enormous wolf looked at the cloak, then at Emma, almost puzzled by such simple generosity. She laughed softly. Please do not argue with your healer. The wolf slowly settled onto the cloak, releasing a long, peaceful breath. Emma sat beside him, leaning against the cave wall while listening to the fading rainfall outside. The valley had become astonishingly quiet. Then, without warning, the warm golden crystals inside the cave grew brighter than before. Their gentle light flowed deeper into the darkness until it illuminated the faint outline of something unimaginably large resting beneath the mountain. Emma could not yet understand what she was seeing. The great wolf slowly rose to his feet once more, his silver eyes fixed upon the ancient shape emerging from the darkness, while another deep, steady breath echoed through the cave, closer now than ever before. Emma could not look away from the immense shape resting deep within the mountain. The glowing crystals scattered across the cavern walls gradually revealed the outline of folded wings larger than the tallest towers of Blackwood Citadel, scales that shimmered like polished bronze beneath the golden light, and a powerful chest rising and falling with slow, ancient breaths. The great wolf remained beside her, his silver eyes fixed upon the sleeping giant, while every instinct urged caution rather than fear. Emma quietly lowered her voice until it became little more than a whisper. So the stories were true. Another gentle tremor passed beneath the stone floor, causing tiny glowing crystals to drift from the ceiling like floating stars before settling softly around them. The dragon still slept, yet every peaceful breath seemed capable of stirring the mountain itself. Emma instinctively gathered her satchel, making certain every glass bottle and metal clasp rested securely inside. She wanted nothing to create unnecessary noise. The great wolf slowly turned toward her, gently touching her hand with the side of his broad muzzle. His quiet gesture carried unmistakable meaning. Leave now. Emma smiled with gratitude before lightly stroking the thick silver fur beneath his neck. We will leave together, she whispered, but only after I know you can safely walk. She carefully examined the fresh bandage once more. The swelling around the injured leg had already begun to lessen, yet she knew forcing him down the steep mountain trail too soon might reopen the wound. She reached into her satchel and removed a small bundle of dried mountain herbs, crushing them gently between her palms until their calming fragrance filled the cool air. Mixing them with a few drops of spring water inside a wooden bowl, she prepared another soothing poultice and carefully replaced the original dressing with patient hands. Throughout the treatment, the great wolf remained perfectly still, trusting every gentle movement she made. As Emma finished securing the clean bandage, she quietly smiled. You are healing well. We simply need a little more time. The wolf lowered his head slightly, as though acknowledging both her kindness and her wisdom. Suddenly, another warm current of air drifted outward from the darkness. This time it carried a faint scent of cedar, rain, and something surprisingly sweet, almost like wild honey warmed by the morning sun. Emma slowly looked toward the heart of the cavern. The enormous outline had become clearer than before. One massive claw rested peacefully against the ancient stone, while the dragon's long tail curved around towering crystal formations that had likely grown during centuries of quiet sleep. Nothing about the creature suggested anger. Instead, the mountain felt strangely alive, breathing with calm dignity rather than menace. Emma remained seated beside the great wolf, quietly observing the peaceful silence. She found herself wondering how many generations had passed beneath the watch of this sleeping guardian. How many kingdoms had risen and fallen while the dragon dreamed beneath the mountain. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of pebbles rolling across the stone. She looked up. One of the glowing crystals near the dragon's resting place had loosened from the wall and gently tumbled toward the entrance. It came to rest only a few feet away from her boots, glowing with a warm golden light unlike any gemstone she had ever seen. Emma hesitated. She had no desire to disturb anything belonging to this sacred place. Instead of reaching for it, she quietly moved the crystal away from the narrow path so no traveler might accidentally step upon it. Then she returned to the great wolf without another glance. Deep within the cavern, something changed. The great breathing paused for the briefest moment before slowly resuming. The warmth filling the cave became even gentler than before. The great wolf noticed it immediately. His ears lifted, yet he did not grow uneasy. He simply watched the darkness with calm attention. Miles away, Ethan Blackwood and Captain Rowan finally reached the lower forest surrounding the Forbidden Mountain. Fresh paw prints appeared along the rain-soaked trail before disappearing beneath ancient cedar trees. Ethan knelt beside them, gently brushing water away from the soft impressions in the earth. "He came this way," he said quietly. Rowan nodded. "The tracks are accompanied by lighter footprints." Ethan's silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Someone found him. High Elder Benedict, who had insisted on joining the search despite his age, looked toward the towering mountain hidden beyond the mist. "Then let us hope," he said softly, "that the one who found him carried compassion instead of fear." Back inside the cavern, Emma leaned comfortably against the stone wall while the great wolf rested beside her. The storm outside had finally ended, leaving only the gentle sound of water dripping from the mountain cliffs. Then, without warning, two enormous golden eyes slowly opened within the darkness. They did not blaze with fury. They did not threaten or roar. They simply watched the young Omega as she quietly adjusted the great wolf's blanket, completely unaware that the oldest guardian in the Northern Territories had just awakened and was observing every act of kindness in absolute silence. Emma remained completely unaware that two ancient golden eyes had opened within the darkness beyond the glowing crystal formations. She continued adjusting the wool blanket beneath the great wolf, making certain the injured leg rested comfortably before checking the bandage one final time. Satisfied that the herbs were beginning to reduce the swelling, she smiled softly. "You are much stronger than yesterday," she whispered. "Soon you will be able to return home." The great wolf quietly lifted his head, watching her with calm silver eyes filled with unmistakable trust. He gently touched her shoulder with the side of his muzzle before settling back down once more. Deep within the cavern, the ancient dragon observed every movement without making a sound. Centuries had passed since anyone had entered the sacred valley without seeking treasure, glory, or power. Yet the young Omega had crossed forbidden ground carrying nothing except healing herbs, fresh water, and a heart determined to save another living creature. The dragon continued watching in thoughtful silence. Another warm breath flowed gently through the cavern, causing the glowing crystals to shimmer more brightly than before. Emma looked toward the beautiful light with quiet wonder. "How extraordinary," she murmured. "It feels as though the mountain itself is breathing." The great wolf slowly stood and calmly moved closer to her, not out of fear, but quiet caution. Emma interpreted the gesture immediately. "You still wish to leave?" She nodded gently. "I understand." Carefully gathering her satchel, she rose to her feet and looked toward the narrow trail leading back through the valley. Before taking a single step, however, she noticed something unusual. One of the crystal formations near the cave wall had partially collapsed during the earlier tremors. Several heavy stones blocked the safest path leading away from the entrance. Emma quietly examined the obstruction. "We cannot take this way anymore." The great wolf tested the remaining open trail with careful steps, but quickly stopped. His injured leg was healing, yet the uneven rocks would make the climb difficult. Emma searched the area thoughtfully before spotting several sturdy fallen branches resting nearby. She carefully gathered them together, creating a simple support that would help guide the great wolf safely across the loose stones without placing unnecessary strain upon his healing leg. She worked patiently, never rushing despite the mysterious presence surrounding them. While she adjusted the final branch into place, a soft golden glow spread across the cave floor. Emma looked up. The enormous dragon had not moved from its resting place, yet its ancient eyes remained open, quietly following every act of compassion unfolding before it. Instead of panic, Emma felt an unexpected calm settle over her heart. The dragon did not appear angry. It looked almost curious. Slowly, with complete respect, Emma placed one hand over her heart and inclined her head toward the great guardian. "I am sorry if I disturbed your rest," she said gently. I only wished to help someone who needed me. Her quiet voice echoed softly through the vast chamber before fading into silence. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the dragon lowered its immense head by only a few inches. The movement was almost imperceptible, yet it carried extraordinary grace. Warm golden light reflected across its ancient scales while the cavern remained perfectly still. The great wolf watched the dragon carefully, but showed no sign of aggression. Instead, he calmly stood beside Emma as though understanding that neither guardian nor healer intended harm. Outside the mountain, Ethan Blackwood and his companions finally reached the edge of the Forbidden Valley. Captain Rowan carefully examined fresh footprints preserved in the damp earth. They entered only a short time ago, he reported. Ethan looked toward the towering cliffs rising before them. His concern grew with every passing moment. High Elder Benedict quietly stepped beside him. Your Majesty, the old historian said softly, if the ancient guardian has awakened, remember that wisdom often recognizes kindness before strength. Ethan nodded, though his eyes never left the hidden valley ahead. Then let us hope kindness arrived first. Back inside the cavern, Emma slowly guided the great wolf toward the newly cleared path. Before taking the first careful step, the wolf paused. He looked once toward the dragon, then toward Emma, almost seeking silent permission. The dragon remained perfectly motionless. Then, in a gesture that no living witness had seen for countless generations, the great guardian slowly closed its enormous golden eyes once again. The warm light filling the cavern softened into peaceful stillness as another deep, gentle breath echoed through the mountain. Emma smiled with quiet relief, believing the ancient creature had simply chosen to return to sleep. She never realized that the dragon had not closed its eyes because she was leaving. It had closed them because, for the first time in centuries, it no longer felt the need to watch over a heart that had already proven itself worthy. Emma carefully adjusted the final support branch before smiling with quiet satisfaction. There, she whispered to the great wolf. This path should be much easier now. The magnificent silver wolf slowly tested his injured leg. The fresh herbs had already eased much of the discomfort, and with Emma walking patiently beside him, each careful step became steadier than the last. Together, they moved away from the deepest part of the cavern, while warm golden light from the ancient crystals gently illuminated the stone beneath their feet. Neither of them noticed that the enormous dragon had opened its eyes once more. The ancient guardian watched in thoughtful silence, its calm gaze following the young Omega as she remained focused entirely upon the wolf instead of herself. Emma never looked back. She believed the dragon deserved peace, and she had no desire to disturb the sacred mountain any longer than necessary. The great wolf paused after several yards and turned his head toward the darkness. For one brief moment, the dragon slowly inclined its great head in a gesture so subtle that only another ancient creature might have understood its meaning. The wolf answered with the slightest lowering of his own head before continuing beside Emma. Outside the cavern, cool mountain air greeted them as clouds gradually drifted apart, allowing late afternoon sunlight to spill across the valley. Rainwater shimmered on every pine branch while distant waterfalls echoed peacefully through the surrounding cliffs. Emma breathed deeply, grateful to feel the fresh air once again. We are almost home, she said softly. The great wolf seemed noticeably stronger now. Although he still favored his injured leg slightly, he walked with growing confidence, remaining close beside the healer who had refused to abandon him. Suddenly, the quiet valley carried the distant sound of approaching horses. Emma stopped walking. The great wolf immediately lifted his head. A few moments later, several mounted royal guards emerged from the forest trail, their dark cloaks moving gently in the mountain breeze. At their front rode Alpha King Ethan Blackwood. The instant his silver eyes found the great wolf standing safely beside Emma, relief crossed his face before settling into quiet gratitude. Without hesitation, Ethan dismounted and walked directly toward them. The great wolf calmly crossed the remaining distance first. Ethan placed one hand against the wolf's broad neck, carefully examining the fresh bandages wrapped around the injured leg. You found him, he said quietly, though his eyes had already shifted toward Emma. She nodded with gentle humility. He was injured near the cave entrance. I only did what any healer should do. Captain Rowan looked beyond Emma toward the vast mountain behind her. His expression changed immediately. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "those tracks lead directly into the forbidden cavern." Ethan looked from the cave entrance back to Emma. "You went inside?" Emma answered honestly, "Only far enough to care for him." Rowan exchanged an uneasy glance with several guards. "No one enters that place." Before anyone could continue, High Elder Benedict slowly stepped forward. His experienced eyes quietly studied Emma, then the great wolf, and finally the peaceful cave resting behind them. "Did you encounter anything unusual?" he asked gently. Emma hesitated for only a moment before answering. "I believe I saw the ancient dragon." Complete silence settled across the valley. None of the guards spoke. Even the mountain breeze seemed to pause. Ethan looked at her with calm disbelief rather than doubt. "And you are standing here unharmed." Emma nodded. "It watched us." Benedict's thoughtful expression softened. "Did it threaten you?" Emma slowly shook her head. "No. It only watched while I cared for the great wolf." The elder lowered his eyes for a brief moment, as though remembering words written long before his own lifetime. "Remarkable," he whispered. Captain Rowan looked toward the cave entrance with renewed caution. "Should we secure the area, Your Majesty?" Ethan remained silent while studying Emma's calm face. She showed no pride, no excitement, and no desire to exaggerate what had happened. She simply looked relieved that the great wolf was safe. Before Ethan could answer, a gentle warmth flowed through the valley. The mountain behind them released one long, peaceful breath that carried no fear, only quiet dignity. Everyone instinctively turned toward the cave. High above the entrance, sunlight touched the ancient cliffs just as hundreds of tiny golden crystals hidden within the stone briefly shimmered together like distant stars. The light lasted only a heartbeat before fading once more. Benedict smiled softly. It has acknowledged her. No one questioned the elder's words. Even the great wolf quietly walked back to Emma's side and sat beside her with complete contentment. Ethan watched the silent display before looking at the woman who had crossed forbidden ground, carrying nothing except healing herbs and compassion. For the first time since beginning the search, he understood that rescuing his loyal companion had not been the only extraordinary thing she had accomplished that day. Somehow, through kindness alone, she had earned the peaceful regard of a guardian older than kingdoms themselves. The peaceful silence lingering across the forbidden valley remained untouched as everyone stood facing the ancient mountain. The golden shimmer upon the cliffs slowly faded, leaving only the gentle sound of distant waterfalls and the whisper of wind moving through the towering pines. No one spoke for several long moments. Even the royal guards, seasoned warriors who had faced countless dangers throughout the northern territories, seemed unwilling to disturb the quiet dignity surrounding the sacred place. Emma remained beside the great wolf, gently resting one hand upon the thick silver fur around his neck. She did not fully understand why everyone looked at her with such astonishment. In her heart, she had simply done what any healer should have done. Ethan slowly stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. His silver eyes moved from the carefully wrapped bandage around the great wolf's injured leg to the small leather satchel hanging across Emma's shoulder. The same satchel still held damp bundles of herbs, simple linen bandages, and nearly empty bottles of healing water. There were no magical relics, enchanted weapons, or symbols of ancient power. Only the ordinary tools of someone whose greatest strength had always been compassion. Ethan spoke quietly. "You entered the oldest place in our kingdom carrying nothing except supplies meant to heal others." Emma offered a modest smile. "I did not think I needed anything else." Her answer settled over the valley with remarkable simplicity. High Elder Benedict slowly closed his eyes for a brief moment before opening them once again. "That," he said softly, "is precisely why the mountain welcomed you." Captain Rowan looked toward the elder with respectful curiosity. "Welcomed her?" Benedict nodded gently. "Many believe ancient guardians judge strength by power." His gaze rested upon the peaceful cave entrance. "The oldest legends tell a different story. They remember hearts long after kingdoms have forgotten names." Ethan listened carefully while Emma quietly continued checking the great wolf's bandage to ensure the journey home would not cause further discomfort. She seemed almost unaware that the conversation centered entirely upon her. Benedict continued. "Across countless generations, ambitious rulers sought the favor of the ancient dragon. Warriors climbed these mountains hoping to prove courage. Scholars searched for forgotten wisdom. Treasure hunters imagined unimaginable riches hidden beneath the stone. The elder smiled faintly. Very few returned with anything except disappointment. Ethan looked toward Emma once again. She asked for nothing. Exactly, Benedict replied. She came searching only for someone who needed help. The great wolf slowly rose to his feet and calmly walked a short distance before stopping beside Ethan. The Alpha King gently rested one hand against his loyal companion's shoulder. You trusted her immediately, he murmured. The wolf quietly lifted his silver eyes before looking back toward Emma, who had knelt to gather the remaining herbs scattered near the trail. Without hesitation, the great wolf calmly returned to her side once more. Several guards exchanged quiet smiles. Captain Rowan folded his arms with amused resignation. I believe he has made his opinion very clear. Ethan could not help smiling as well. Yes, he admitted softly. He certainly has. Their journey back toward Blackwood Citadel began beneath the warm glow of the late afternoon sun. Emma walked at an easy pace beside the great wolf, allowing him to choose his own speed while carefully watching his injured leg. Ethan remained nearby, never interfering with her work, but quietly observing the extraordinary patience she showed during every step of the journey. Whenever the trail became uneven, she paused without complaint. Whenever the wolf slowed, she waited without impatience. She spoke to him with the same gentle encouragement she offered every patient entrusted to her care. By the time the castle towers finally appeared beyond the forest, the great wolf walked with noticeably greater confidence. At the main gates, servants and palace guards immediately gathered after recognizing the familiar silver coat approaching through the trees. Relief spread quickly throughout the courtyard as word traveled that the great wolf had returned safely. Yet another detail captured everyone's attention almost immediately. Rather than walking beside the Alpha King, the magnificent wolf remained quietly beside Emma all the way through the castle gates. Housekeeper Eleanor smiled warmly as she welcomed them home. It appears our guest has gained a very devoted friend. Emma laughed softly. I believe I simply gained a very determined patient. The great wolf gently brushed his shoulder against her arm as though agreeing. That evening, after the royal physicians carefully examined the healing injury and confirmed that Emma's treatment had been exactly right, Ethan invited her to the quiet royal garden overlooking the western cliffs. The setting sun painted the sky with soft shades of gold and crimson, while cool evening air carried the fragrance of blooming white roses. They stood together beside an ancient stone fountain without speaking for several moments. Finally, Ethan turned toward her. Today you reminded me that true greatness is not measured by titles or strength. Emma looked at him with quiet curiosity. Ethan's voice remained calm and sincere. It is measured by the willingness to care for another life without expecting anything in return. Emma lowered her eyes modestly before smiling. My grandmother always told me that kindness becomes strongest when no one is watching. Ethan looked toward the distant silhouette of the Forbidden Mountain rising peacefully beyond the forest. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, that is exactly why something older than all of us chose to watch you today. The days following their return from the Forbidden Mountain quietly changed the rhythm of life inside Blackwood Citadel. Word traveled gently through every corridor, not because anyone wished to exaggerate the story, but because no one could explain what had happened. The great wolf had returned safely. The ancient dragon had remained peaceful, and the young Omega who carried nothing except healing herbs had walked away with the silent respect of both legendary guardians. Emma, however, paid little attention to the growing whispers. Every morning she returned to the royal infirmary before sunrise, arranging fresh herbs, preparing medicines, and greeting patients with the same gentle smile she had offered long before anyone knew her name. To her, nothing had changed. Someone still needed care. Someone still needed hope. That was enough. The great wolf seemed to disagree. Every morning, shortly after Emma began working, the magnificent silver guardian quietly appeared outside the infirmary doors. He never interrupted her work. He never demanded attention. He simply rested nearby, patiently watching while villagers, children, elderly gardeners, and palace servants came seeking treatment. At first, everyone believed his visits would end once his injured leg fully recovered. Instead, as the days passed, The wolf became healthier while his determination to remain close to Emma only grew stronger. Dr. Harold Winslow smiled one afternoon as he carefully removed the final bandage from the wolf's healed leg. "You have recovered beautifully," he said warmly. "I believe you no longer require my assistance." The great wolf calmly stood, tested his weight, and walked several comfortable steps across the room without the slightest trace of discomfort. Emma clapped her hands softly. "You are completely healed." The wolf looked toward her with quiet contentment before walking directly to her side, instead of toward the castle courtyard. Harold laughed gently. Apparently he believes he still has another appointment. Emma smiled with affectionate amusement while scratching behind the wolf's ear. Perhaps he enjoys the company more than the treatment. Outside the infirmary, several palace guards noticed the familiar sight once again. Captain Rowan folded his arms while watching the enormous silver wolf patiently follow Emma through the herb garden. "His Majesty may officially own the great wolf," he remarked with a grin. "But I suspect the great wolf has already chosen someone else to supervise." Nearby servants quietly laughed in agreement. Later that afternoon, Ethan crossed the eastern gardens, intending to inspect preparations for the approaching winter harvest. Before reaching the greenhouse, he spotted Emma gathering fresh lavender beside the stone pathways, while the great wolf rested peacefully beneath a flowering tree only a few feet away. Ethan stopped without announcing his presence. The wolf immediately noticed him and calmly raised his head. For one brief moment, Ethan wondered whether his loyal companion would return to his side after so many days apart. Instead, the great wolf simply acknowledged his king with a calm look before settling comfortably beside Emma once again. Ethan could not help smiling. There was no disappointment in his expression, only quiet understanding. Emma finally noticed him and greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, Your Majesty." Ethan returned the smile. "Good afternoon, Emma." He glanced toward the relaxed wolf before asking with gentle humor, "Has he officially become your assistant?" Emma laughed softly. "He is a wonderful listener." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. He never was particularly interested in paperwork. They walked together through the garden, while the great wolf followed at an easy pace behind them. Warm sunlight filtered through ancient oak branches, filling the peaceful paths with moving patterns of light and shadow. Neither Ethan nor Emma hurried the conversation. They spoke about the recovering patients, the changing seasons, and the herbs that would soon bloom before winter arrived. The quiet simplicity of the afternoon felt unexpectedly comforting. As they approached the marble fountain, High Elder Benedict happened to be feeding small birds resting along the water's edge. He watched the three companions approach before smiling knowingly. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "have you noticed something remarkable?" Ethan looked toward the great wolf. "Many things lately." Benedict nodded. "Your loyal companion no longer follows commands." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "He follows his own heart." The elder smiled gently. "Exactly." Emma looked between them with quiet curiosity. Benedict continued. "Throughout history, the great wolf has always walked beside the ruler of Blackwood Citadel. Yet today he chooses to remain beside someone who never asked for his loyalty." Ethan slowly watched the peaceful animal resting near Emma's feet. There was no confusion left in his heart, only growing admiration for the woman whose kindness had quietly transformed every life she touched. At that very moment, the great wolf calmly stood, walked to Emma's side once more, and gently rested his head against her shoulder with complete trust before settling peacefully beside her beneath the afternoon sun. Every guard, servant, healer, and elder watching from across the gardens understood the meaning without anyone needing to speak. The great wolf had made his choice openly before the entire castle, and for the first time Ethan realized that instead of feeling replaced, he felt profoundly grateful that the one his oldest companion trusted most was the very same person his own heart had already begun choosing as well. Autumn gradually settled across the northern territories, covering the forests surrounding Blackwood Citadel with shades of gold and crimson, while cool morning air carried the fragrance of pine and freshly fallen leaves through every open courtyard. Life inside the castle returned to its familiar rhythm, yet something quiet had undeniably changed. Wherever Emma walked, she was greeted with warmer smiles than before. The palace servants admired her kindness, the royal physicians respected her remarkable skill, and even the youngest children visiting the infirmary eagerly searched for the gentle healer whose stories always made difficult days feel lighter. Emma accepted every greeting with the same quiet humility she had shown since the day she first arrived. She never spoke about the Forbidden Mountain unless someone asked directly, and even then she described the ancient dragon with gratitude rather than excitement. She believed some experiences deserved respect more than celebration. Ethan watched all of this with growing admiration. From the balcony outside his private study, he often noticed Emma crossing the castle gardens carrying baskets of herbs while the great wolf faithfully walked beside her. The sight no longer surprised him. Instead, it filled him with an unfamiliar sense of peace. High Elder Benedict quietly joined him one afternoon, resting both hands upon the smooth stone railing overlooking the eastern gardens. "Your Majesty," the elder asked gently, "what do you see?" Ethan smiled faintly while watching Emma pause to help a young servant gather flowers scattered by the autumn wind. Someone who never changes because the world finally notices her. Benedict nodded with quiet approval. "Then you have begun seeing what the mountain saw." Ethan remained silent, allowing those words to settle comfortably in his thoughts. Later that afternoon, Emma finished organizing fresh medicinal herbs inside the greenhouse before preparing to return to the infirmary. As she stepped outside, she found Ethan waiting near the garden path beside the marble fountain where many of their conversations had quietly begun. The great wolf rested peacefully nearby, watching both of them with relaxed silver eyes. Ethan greeted her with a warm smile. "Would you walk with me?" Emma nodded without hesitation. Of course. They followed the winding stone path through blooming white roses and ancient cedar trees while soft golden sunlight filtered gently through the branches above them. For a while neither of them hurried to speak. The silence felt comfortable, filled only by birdsong and the distant sound of water flowing through the castle fountains. Finally Ethan slowed his pace and looked toward Emma. "There is something I have wanted to say since the day we returned from the mountain." Emma listened quietly. Ethan took one slow breath before continuing. "I thank you for saving the great wolf, but I never truly thank you for what you gave me." Emma tilted her head slightly. "What did I give you?" Ethan smiled with quiet sincerity. "Perspective." She looked at him with gentle curiosity. Ethan continued. "I spent many years believing leadership meant protecting everyone through strength alone. Then I watched you walk into the oldest place in our kingdom, carrying nothing except kindness." He paused briefly before meeting her eyes once again. "You reminded me that compassion can accomplish what power never could." Emma lowered her gaze modestly before smiling. "My grandmother always believed kindness reaches places that fear never can." Ethan nodded. She was wise. Before either of them spoke again, the great wolf slowly stood and walked toward the marble fountain. He stopped for a moment before looking beyond the castle walls toward the distant silhouette of the Forbidden Mountain resting peacefully beneath the afternoon sky. At that very moment, far beyond the forests, sunlight briefly reflected across the highest cliffs surrounding the ancient cavern. A soft golden shimmer appeared for only an instant before disappearing once more. Benedict, watching from the castle balcony, smiled knowingly. "The guardian remembers," he whispered. Emma never noticed the distant light. She remained focused on arranging several loose herbs inside her basket before one small bundle slipped onto the pathway. Ethan bent down immediately, gathering the scattered lavender before offering it back with an easy smile. Their hands briefly met as she accepted it. Neither of them pulled away too quickly. The simple moment felt strangely important despite its quiet simplicity. The great wolf watched with calm satisfaction before gently lowering himself onto the warm grass nearby. Ethan looked at Emma with complete honesty. "The ancient dragon honored your kindness." Emma shook her head softly. "I think it simply understood why I came." Ethan smiled. "So do I." They continued walking side by side through the peaceful gardens while the afternoon sun slowly settled toward the western mountains. Behind them, the great wolf followed at an easy pace, no longer because he feared losing either of them, but because every step together felt exactly where they were meant to be. High above the kingdom, hidden beyond clouds and ancient stone, a pair of enormous golden eyes quietly opened for only a single peaceful moment before closing once again, as though the oldest guardian in the Northern Territories had already seen everything it needed to see. Winter's first gentle snowfall arrived quietly over Blackwood Citadel, covering the castle rooftops, ancient pine forests, and distant mountain peaks with a blanket of sparkling white. The northern territories seemed softer beneath the pale morning light, as though the entire kingdom had chosen to pause and breathe more slowly. Inside the royal gardens, Emma walked along the familiar stone paths carrying a basket filled with fresh evergreen branches and winter herbs gathered before sunrise. The cold air painted her cheeks with a gentle blush, while delicate snowflakes settled upon her light blue cloak. Beside her, the great wolf moved with calm confidence, his magnificent silver coat shining brilliantly against the untouched snow. Months had passed since the extraordinary day at the Forbidden Mountain, yet the memory remained alive in quiet ways that no one could fully explain. The castle had changed without anyone announcing it. Servants greeted one another more kindly. Young healers worked with greater patience after watching Emma care for every patient with equal compassion. Even the royal guards, once known mainly for discipline and strength, had begun offering small acts of assistance throughout the castle without expecting recognition. Ethan often noticed these changes while attending council meetings or walking through the courtyards. He understood that true leadership did not always begin with royal commands. Sometimes it began with one ordinary person choosing kindness when no one expected it. That afternoon, the Great Hall welcomed villagers from nearby settlements for the annual Winter Gratitude Gathering, a tradition celebrating another peaceful year across the Northern Territories. Families filled the magnificent hall with warm conversation, while musicians played gentle melodies beneath towering crystal chandeliers. Children laughed as snow drifted beyond the enormous windows, and long wooden tables overflowed with freshly baked bread, hot soup, roasted vegetables, and sweet berry pastries prepared by the royal kitchens. Emma quietly helped the palace staff carry warm meals to elderly guests before making certain every child had a comfortable seat. She never sought attention, believing service itself was reward enough. Ethan watched from across the hall with quiet admiration. High Elder Benedict stepped beside him, smiling gently. She still does not realize what she has given this kingdom. Ethan looked toward Emma as she knelt to wrap a warm blanket around an elderly woman's shoulders before returning to refill another bowl of soup. Perhaps that is why she was able to give it. Benedict nodded with peaceful satisfaction. Exactly. A sudden movement near the entrance drew everyone's attention. The great wolf calmly entered the hall, walking through the gathered guests with his usual quiet dignity. Instead of stopping beside the Alpha King, he crossed the entire room before gently sitting beside Emma once again. No one appeared surprised anymore. Smiles spread naturally throughout the gathering as children carefully approached to stroke the magnificent silver fur, while the great wolf remained perfectly gentle beneath their tiny hands. Ethan slowly crossed the hall until he stood beside Emma. The cheerful conversations around them continued, yet for a brief moment the world seemed wonderfully quiet. "May I borrow our kingdom's favorite healer for a moment?" he asked with an easy smile. Emma laughed softly. "Only if my patient agrees." She looked toward the great wolf. The great guardian calmly rose and stepped aside as though granting permission. Together, Ethan and Emma walked toward the castle balcony overlooking the snow-covered forest stretching endlessly toward the distant silhouette of the Forbidden Mountain. The setting sun painted the winter sky with soft shades of gold, rose, and silver, while countless snowflakes drifted peacefully through the evening air. Ethan rested his hands upon the stone railing before speaking. "When I first searched for the great wolf, I believed I was trying to rescue someone precious to me." He turned toward Emma with quiet sincerity. "I never imagined that journey would lead me to the person who would quietly change my own heart." Emma looked at the peaceful landscape before answering. "I never intended to change anyone." Ethan smiled warmly. "That is exactly why you did." They stood together in comfortable silence while the great wolf settled peacefully beside them. Far beyond the kingdom, hidden within the sacred mountain, warm golden light gently shimmered through ancient crystals deep inside the forgotten cavern. The ancient dragon remained resting beneath the stone, breathing slowly as it had for countless centuries. Yet for one final moment, the enormous guardian opened its ancient golden eyes and gazed toward the distant castle before quietly lowering its great head once more. The mountain returned to perfect stillness, as though the oldest guardian of the Northern Territories had witnessed the ending it had patiently waited generations to see. Emma looked toward the snowy horizon with a peaceful smile. Ethan remained beside her, neither of them needing to speak another word. The great wolf rested comfortably at their feet, while evening settled gently across the kingdom they would protect together. And so the legend remembered by future generations was never simply about an ancient dragon, a great wolf, or an alpha king. It became the story of a kind Omega whose quiet compassion awakened the goodness already waiting inside every heart fortunate enough to cross her path, proving that the gentlest acts of courage often leave the greatest legacy of all.